Hi, I just wanted to talk really quickly about what I think should be changed in the game. I think there's a lot of stuff they can do better. I think a lot of these points are also not as strong as the first one, but the first one I think personally is the most important. I know a lot of people disagree with some of these points, but I think it's important to get it out there. First of all, is make heroes more extreme. There's a lot of cases in the game where a hero doesn't really have a niche anymore, or the niche has been sort of made better by another hero. But there's two big violators of it, and I think the first one is Orisa. So I think a lot of tanks should have personality in the game. Like Reinhardt kind of shields his team in. He's kind of the front line. He's the guy who can get everyone in the fight and protect them when he needs to. You have a Winston who I think can jump out in the background and sort of go for people who are out of position, play on high ground. You have Hammond who I think has really hard engage, so you can play with the team just with splash dive and do as much damage as you can initially. But then you have Orisa, who I think should be the best extended tank in the game, extended fight tank in the game. And what that would mean would be the longer a fight goes on, the longer distance you are, the better she is in comparison to other tanks. And she is that. She's the best extended fight tank in the game. The issue is she has an ability which gives her effectively 800 health and double healing. And is actually made much better by armor. So you put that on the tank, which is the best extended fight tank in the game. She doesn't really have a condition where she's bad at. And that's sort of what the meta is revolving around right now. And this kind of goes on to Moira, where I don't think Moira should be played with shields too much. I think she should be required to do damage to heal. But right now, she has so much healing in her reserve that she doesn't need to really damage that much. Her managing of her damage is kind of like left in the past, because you get Coalescence now basically the second you get out of healing. I think what they should do to Moira is, I don't really know what they would buff. Maybe they could buff her ultimate or something, but I think they really need to nerf her healing reserve really, really hard. Maybe they could buff her regen, but make it so Moira's actually have to play around her reserve, because before in the past they've actually buffed her weaknesses. Same with Orisa. And because they've started buffing weaknesses in the game, another example would be Ashe recently with her reload buff. They sort of lose a lot of their personality and makes them good all around. And when you make a character like Moira, who should have a clear lose condition, really good all around, then she kind of loses that, and she's just good in all situations because she's really hard to dive. Now she's really good at extend fight. She's the highest healing in the game base. And with Orisa, who has effectively double healing, if you think of how much damage is in the game, Orisa with armor and with Fortify, Moira can get out almost like 300 to 400 effective healing a second, which is ridiculous. It's probably going to out heal every single damage source in the game. And I just don't think that should be the case. But moving on, making heroes more extreme gives clearer win conditions. So, Winston wants to play on high ground, Hammond wants to engage, Orisa doesn't want to engage, she wants to stay at a distance. All that kind of stuff I think would be really, really fun. But just the way the meta has sort of come out, it just becomes what doesn't die, what can stay alive the longest, what takes away enemy win conditions. And because there's so many heroes in the game that do that so well right now, because they're so well rounded, it makes it really unfun, I think, for a lot of players. Teams can play around things cleaner, which I think is what's really fun to watch. Watching a team execute something very cleanly, a Widow getting amazing flank on a team with, one shield, she can't really get stopped. Or like if a team is running double shield and Fortify's not in the game, a Reinhardt or, a Hammond could hard engage on it and really destroy that comp. But currently, you don't really have that really clear win condition, and that's really, really apparent now, where it's basically just two shields looking at each other until Doom or Reaper gets a kill, or, one team just effectively blocks the other tank's healing more with their shields, and it's so not clear, and it's not really fun to watch either. I know that the Overwatch viewers technically rose this year, but I really think it should have rose more, especially with how much esports is exploding right now. Overwatch is actually, I think, falling behind a little bit other games, especially games like League, which can double year to year. If you make heroes more extreme, it also makes it easier for new players to understand the game. So, like, if you tell a new player, Winston wants to play on high ground, or Orisa doesn't want to engage, he just wants to shoot from a distance, that stuff really easy to understand. But currently, the way things are playing, it's like Orisa wants to kind of stay at a distance against certain heroes, but not all of them, and then She's actually really good on gauge, so you don't actually have to stand at a distance, but you want to body block the entire enemy team as an extended fight tank. It just makes it really unclear, and it makes it harder to play in general. So I think if you're actually bouncing around low elo, having much clearer things would be a lot better for that. Um, I think it will give more variation at every level of the game. But, and this is a big thing, if everyone is practicing double shield, everyone becomes really good at double shield. Uh, and then it's really hard to beat. But if you have to like flex a lot more, then that actually makes more comps better at a lot of maps because people will be worse at certain comps. So, like if dive was played every single game, then you wouldn't be able to beat it on Gibraltar. But if teams have less experience on dive, then you might be able to run something like double shield on Gibraltar a lot better into it. I mean, without fortify, obviously. Um, and I think that would just add more variation. It'd make a lot more things meta, and it'd make you able to play around things better. Like if Sigmas didn't have to play Sigma every game, they might be a little bit worse, and you could pull out something like Tracer a little bit more. So my next point is to reset ranked. As someone who recently hit GM, I will say it doesn't feel like I did anything to hit GM on Orisa. I just abused meta. And I sort of looked at a lot of people who are on GM on my friends list, and that's sort of the case. They never really shined. Except for one meta in history, and because you don't have to play anymore, it's really hard to drop, honestly. You just have to sort of not even pull your own weight, you just kind of have to go, you have to know how to get carried, honestly. And you can stay ATA ranked for as long as you want to. So that's basically different metas boosting different players, and then it's so hard to drop that it doesn't really happen, so I think you need to reset ranked altogether. Currently, rank shows what rank you can stay at, not what you can get to. There's a lot of GM and, I mean, players of any rank, really, who got to a certain rank, but I don't believe could get to a certain rank again. And it's been confirmed with some players who have dropped, but it can take you 5 or 6 seasons to actually drop because it is so difficult to fall. In resetting ranked, I think would honestly just reset it, and then you'd see what players can actually reach GM. And playing, I think, with lower ranked players and being able to win lower ranked games is really important. I know that a lot of streamers have done like bronze to GM games, but a lot of the time those are really, really good players, or, DPS players, or players who just can get to higher ranks. And in that case, I think that you should be able to. You should be able to play with reset ranked, and you shouldn't mind. Even if you have to play more, I don't think you should really complain about that, because to stay at the top, I think you should have to play in general. Okay, so I think they need to lower average SR as well. I might be completely wrong about this, but I think if you go 50-50 in stats, you're completely even, then out of placements you start at 2,500. And just watching new players and coaching new players for a long time, I don't think that's where the average person who starts the game is nearly at. I think Platinum, just as a word, shows more than new player. I honestly think that the average SR should be low gold, or gold exactly 2000, and then you can get variation from there. But starting like the game new at low plat, I mean, I've seen a lot of new players in plat recently, and it makes plat a lot more of a gamble. It's kind of like who gets the new players and who gets the smurfs. If you get more smurfs and less new players, you just win a lot of the time, which feels like garbage. I'm not personally in plat, but I do have accounts in plat, and honestly, that's just what it feels like half the time. Especially on like a tank or healer. It matters a lot less on DPS, but on tank and healer, it's very important. And with 2,500, it makes a gold 2 plat much more random, when if it was just like low gold that, I think that you could raise if you were really, really good, just starting out the game, or if you were Smurf or something. But if you were new, there'd be a lot less of a chance you'd actually get to those higher ranks. I think they should soft reset every season. It's for the same reason that I think you should reset ranked. But I think that if all players play more, it'll actually make ranks more accurate, first of all. And the reason I think that is because the more you play in a system like this, I think it's called the rule of large numbers, the more accurate it will be. So more people playing more games will make the rank system more accurate. Also, as I stated before, you can actually see who can make it to high ranks instead of who can just get to high ranks. Also, players who are high GM and really belong there, not even high GM, I mean even Masters to Diamond, they'll win more games and really get to learn that they've improved, because a lot of the time I know players who think that they haven't changed at all when I've seen them change. I know that doesn't mean a lot coming from me, because I did say I didn't improve to go up in a rank, but I honestly don't feel like I did because I just played Orisa and I didn't have a lot of time on Orisa before that. And when I did play Orisa, I normally didn't have a very high win rate. And I did play meta back then, but I feel like this meta is just more impressive. But anyway, you'll be able to see how you've improved. You won't be playing with like diamond players or anything like that, but diamond players will raise, and then you'll get to play against them again. It'll just make all players a little bit closer, and then that'll, I think, also be better because GM will be just a higher percentage of the population. And I think that's pretty healthy for the game. GM will be a true accomplishment. And right now, it doesn't feel like GM is. It feels like 4.3 to 4.6 is really where the accomplishment lies, especially with the attitudes that people have in ranked. And I think it'll just make it easier to extend the season. I think longer seasons are normally better. And when you reset ranked and everything like that, you wouldn't really want to have shorter seasons. And to be honest, when you're just rapid firing seasons like every 2 months or something, they just feel pointless. And it just feels like you're doing it for ranked points. But I feel like seasons should mean something. Overtime. So overtime has tilted me for a really long time, especially someone who watches the game. Because let's say that you're on attack on Anubis or something, and you're just contesting the last point. You can't really finish off their team, and you finish 2 minutes past overtime, which may sound rare, but it's not that rare, to be honest. You get 0 punishment for that, and if the other team finished under a minute, you're going to be within a minute of them, even if you finish like a minute and 30 seconds, for example, after they did. I feel like there should be some sort of punishment for being able to finish a map or finishing a map very late. And I think that on payload maps specifically, this problem is made way worse, just astronomically worse, because you can... a really good example of this that I can think of actually is when you have a minute in overtime, like after the game, after the first 2 pushes and you have a minute, you can finish the map again. Which I think is really, really aggravating, actually, how there's not a big disadvantage to being in overtime. I think that maybe having it tick down faster would be good, or having a like another form of punishment. I really don't know what you can do, but I just know it feels terrible a lot of the time. It's on attack and defense sometimes because you feel so stressed to get on the car, and playing loose is a lot more fun. And then lengthen spawns altogether. This goes for mainly like 2CP maps. I think that you can make fights a lot cleaner. Like, you lose on defense 1 fight, but they're not going to cap the point instantly if you don't contest. If you extend the amount of time the point is going to take. So then you'll get like a clean regroup, or maybe 2 regroups, and then get to fight them. So it's kind of like you switch sides. So, they're attacking, you have a strong defense. Maybe they lose a few pushes, but then they win a push. And then you have to push back the point, which I think should be done. And I think that should be how it played, instead of teams just kind of dogpiling on the point. I know good teams, like really good teams, will regroup, but in some situations it's just not possible. And it makes things like Ball and Mei a lot stronger because they take so long to kill in a lot of situations. I just don't think that coming out of spawn 1 by 1 should be a strategy. It's really not fun to play against. And it's not fun to play as either, because you're not really looking for kills, and just you're playing like Widow or Doom, someone who can get a one-shot. Because doing DPS into 2 healers by yourself is normally really, really difficult to get a kill. Yeah, so I think that's it for just lengthening spawn times. There are some maps like control point maps. The one that instantly comes to mind is Gardens on Lijiang, where overtime can last a really, really long time there as well. And I think just making fights cleaner in the game and having regroups would make it just funner in general. Change spawn locations on 2CP to be closer. This is really aggravating for me personally, because on maps like Anubis or Lunar Colony, it feels garbage to die, because Paris is a big one actually, where you can just die in 1 fight and then you just lose the next fight because you're not there. It just becomes a 5v6. Having to fight every single fight perfectly does not feel very good, and it feels like the first point is always, how long can you stall it before they win? I know that full holds happen, but I think that you could nerf defenders in another way, like maybe change the map just a little bit, or you just lengthen the respawn times in general, or shorten the attack respawns or something. But right now, just dying once and then having to walk all the way back and you're not there for a fight, it just doesn't feel good. And especially at a higher level, people just play around that. They play around getting a single kill and then pushing for a next fight and winning that one. Okay, punish characters who stand close together behind shields. Right now, and this was the same problem in GOATs, you can just stack defensive things, like just things that are AoE or shields or anything like that. And there's no real way to counteract that. If a lot of people with defensive stats stand next to each other, like for example, double shield with Moira, there's no real way to break it. If they made it so you could actually break it, have something similar to like an Orisa pull, which does 50 damage to every single person that hits or something, and put it on like a 20-second cooldown, they wouldn't want to stand close together, and just holding that ability would force people out of shields. And I don't think that would completely break shields either, because you would be able to still play around it. It'd be a very long cooldown. Maybe they could make it obvious when it's coming, but just forcing people out of shields and from sitting so close together is really important. And it feels just like the meta for longer than a year now, from GOATs to now, has been standing close to each other and seeing how long you can live. Maps that are wide open against GOATs worked, but GOATs didn't have double shield, and you could actually play more than 2 DPS, so you'd have a lot more long-range damage. But against this current comp, you don't have as much long-range damage, so it's almost impossible to break. Also, so this kind of goes into Doom. I think they should just make Doom a tank. I think he'd be a lot better, just have him like Hand, where he's just very hard engage, or just like in a rotation where he can punch in and then E out. I don't think his punch should be a one-shot. I think it should be potentially something that happens in an area, it pushes all people back. And then, you can give him more health, more shields, less damage. And I think that'd just make him funner in general. I don't know if you could make his hitbox bigger or something, which I think would be a problem. You could also reduce his movement speed, like not with walking, but with his abilities. So he couldn't be as punished as hard, but he'd be, because of his health, but he'd still be easier to hit. And that's something that I think is aggravating about Doom for a lot of people too, is he is so hard to hit. And then reduce spread in long-range characters. This only really applies to Soldier, but if you're trying to do anything on Soldier, like whether you're going for duels or something, or you're just shooting at a team from a long range, it feels like the spread just takes away so much power. If you just reduce his spread, he'll be a lot more fun to play. I also think they should change his ult probably. If they changed his ult to have something insane, like absolutely no spread at all, and be the ability to shoot through shields and go through people as well, like just unstoppable bullets, or just anything, honestly, it would feel a lot better, because right now when you ult, it just reduces your damage and you can just straight up lose fights because you can't headshot. So these are all the changes I think should happen. Again, I think some of these are a lot weaker than the first one, but I think the first one is the most important. And that's all. Thanks, everybody. Please tell Blizzard to remove Fortify altogether, or just make it so it reduces CC. And have a good day.